I realize I have a pretty tough charge here in many ways, not least of which I'm the 5th keynote. People, I should imagine, are pretty burned out on keynotes at this point, so we're going to gamify this a bit to make it a bit more interesting. I'll explain that in a minute. But anyone who got up and walked out, because this is a community talk, they're going to end up regretting doing that. You guys are going to have a lot of fun, I think. First thing I want to mention, best kept secret in the industry apparently right now is I do not work at TypeSafe or with TypeSafe anymore, and I haven't done since March. I am still very much involved in the community side of things. The practical upshot of all that is it's just taking longer, and I really want to hit that towards the end of this talk. But one of the things I really want to get back to is doing technical talks. Believe it or not, I am kind of a technical guy normally, and I have only done community talks for quite a while. But right now, the reason I do these is it seems to be the place where there is the most need and there's the most value to be had. So enough fluff. If you're thinking this is going to be some kind of fluffy community talk, it is not. I'm going to talk to you one engineer to another. And to make it a bit more fun, I see many people out there with the devices. Of course, this is the 5th keynote. You guys are probably anxious to check your emails and stuff. We're going to weave these into the talk. Anyone who knows me knows that I am a total trivia nut. It releases dopamine directly into my brain to do trivia. And it also appeals to my sense of irony. In an industry where knowledge is this kind of mystical thing, trivia is completely useless knowledge that is extremely fun to have, and you either know it or you don't, and it really makes no difference to your standing as a Scala software engineer, whether you're good at trivia or not. So with that in mind, we're going to play this game as we go. We're going to use the hashtag Scala by the Bay, so get your devices at the ready. The other side of this is it really appeals to me. I'm a big fan of Andy Kaufman, and the Andy Kaufman aspect of having loads of people now see tweets with random stuff coming up and no explanation as to why these things are getting tweeted really appeals to me. So, all right, let's go to the next one. So, this talk grew out of, and this is very hard, no one's going to get this, but tweet if you think you know who said this. Around about the end of last year, there was an unfortunate meltdown in a large community, Scala Z community, where a schism occurred. Ultimately, I think it had quite a positive result, but it caused a very good friend of mine to utter these words, which basically he was sort of disgusted. Don't shout it out until the end, you'll get a chance. Sorry? Oh, hashtag, pound, you know, on Twitter, hashtag Big Scala. Sorry, yes, I should have said that. That's the Scala thing. I'm also shooting for the most tweeted session here, so totally self-serving. Anyway, so anyone know who said that? Now's the time to sort of guess. No? No, it's tough. I read it and I'm like, yeah, that's really not right. So it was this guy, Runar Bjarnason. Now, if you look at somebody who's active in the community, who is pretty much definition of a community guy, it's Runar. He's written a book. He had this picture photoshopped of him and shown at Scala Days in 2014. By the time you get there, you're pretty much part of the community. You know, there's little to deny that. So, but I totally see where he come from, and I shamelessly took that quote out of context. At the time, he was disgusted at a side of this that basically nobody walked away a winner from. It was a bad interchange. Ancient history now, fortunately, but the problem is his definition of community was broken. So let's fix it. Community is basically what you make it. If you're here, you're in the community. All right, so the first quiz, and this is my appeal to you. Why should you care about community? Not because it's the right thing to do, not because of some fluffy reason, for enlightened self-interest. And I will explain that. I'm going to pound this home many times and hopefully convince you by the end of the session. This is why, for example, I started Base, as Alexei mentioned. Why do you think I started Base? I started Base. Oh, by the way, see if you can guess, tweet what that is. Some of you will probably just know. Oh, and the standard rules of trivia apply here. As my publican says, no Google machines. You either know the answer or you don't. The fun is if you don't know the answer a lot of the time, and we'll check the hashtags as we go through before the end of it. So I started BASE because I wanted to learn more about Scala, and there wasn't a Scala user group. So I thought, hey, if I put a Scala user group together, I can get people to come and talk about Scala, and then I can learn. Okay, that's what you call enlightened self-interest. I did it for me. It benefited other people, I'm sure, but ultimately I saw a hole or a problem. Same reason I started the Java Posse, same reason I did all those things, is there was some benefit for me. It wasn't monetary, and it was a lot of work, and at some point I had to look at it and go, I can't keep this up anymore, I have to hand off the baton, but still. So when it comes to community, there is no fate but what we make. And okay, I'm hoping you guys have tweeted. Let's see if we have any tweets. Where's my mouse gone? Up here, and refresh. And you can shout out now if you know what that is. Anybody know what that is? Babylon 5, that's right. The last best hope for good television, as a friend of mine said. Fantastic series. All right, so let's take a look at another preposition I'm going to make, which is that no one is an island. No man is an island is actually what John Donne, the poet, said. He lived back in time a ways. Really, it should have been no one is an island. I like to talk about the fact that I made my computer. I built my computer because it's nerdy. It's worth nerd points. Okay, now, did I really build a computer? Absolutely not. I ordered a bunch of pieces off of Amazon. I ordered a motherboard and a CPU. I got some thermal paste, and I put the CPU on with thermal paste, and then strapped a cooling system to the top of it. It's a liquid cooling system. That's pretty cool. That's not building a computer. Okay, you couldn't. Just think about what you do right now as a software engineer. There is no way you could do this in isolation of other people. Okay. I could maybe, oh, by the way, tweet what this is if you know what it is. That's part of the quiz. There is no way I could even build the case for this in complete isolation from somebody else. Think about the amount of work. I chose this because it's got a wooden case. You think, yeah, I could probably do that. Well, you need tools. For tools, you need a forge. You need to smelt metal and connect things together. If you were in true isolation, you couldn't do any of this stuff, okay? We build on what other people have already done. That's how we work. That's how society functions, okay? If you accept that, then the rest of this talk will just logically build on top of that. So could I build the case? Maybe. Could I build the rest of the thing? No. I mean, it's got chips in it. Even a simple chip would be impossible for me to build in a lifetime on my own. I'd have to go and buy it from somewhere. I'd have to figure out how to put it together, all this sort of thing. To say I built a computer, yeah, it's kind of nerdy cool. I didn't do any such thing. I got a few bits and I assembled them together following some instructions. Okay. So, let's see. Anybody want to shout out what that is? It's an Apple I, that's right. The Apple I was kit. You couldn't buy an Apple I. You bought an Apple I kit and you put the pieces together, usually with some kind of case that you created and stuff like that. It was really quite exciting, different time. So that is the Apple I. All right, so next up, obviously you can see this is an engine. You get no points for that. You can see that it's a Rolls-Royce. I'm looking for a bit more specific on the tweets for this one. So here's the thing. If you accept that you can't do anything in isolation from other people, then logically, how you deal with other people matters, right? Does anybody disagree with this point? No, it's a pretty logical conclusion, right? So, as an engineer, if you need to do something, what do engineers do? They solve problems and they get better at them all the time. That's what we do as engineers. If interaction with people is one of your problems, you should seek to get better at it, just like you do with anything else in engineering. Even if it just comes down to the point that you just want to be left alone to get on with your work, there's a right way to do that and a wrong way to do it. Okay? Telling people to go stick their head in a pig or something is probably not the right way to do it for reasons that will come up in a minute. Learning some people skills, learning some people hacking, as I like to call it, is just like improving any other engineering skill. You get better at it. You practice it, you find what works, and you do that. And there is a word for this. It's called social engineering. It often has a bad connotation, but basically it means learning to engineer people better. Okay? Social engineering is what hackers use to break into large installations and stuff like that. They're very good at it. If you look at successful hackers, they are extremely competent social engineers. Basically comes down to getting people to do what you want them to do. That's what it's about. And if you're really good at it, you not only manipulate people into doing what you want them to do, you make them feel good about the fact that they did it. That's when you've mastered the skill. Okay? Look at it like that. Look at it like an engineer. Does it work to just go and tell people what to do? Well, what was the last time somebody said, just do that to you, and you went off and mindlessly did it? I'm pretty ornery. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm pretty contradictive to that kind of thing. I don't do things because people tell me to do them. So why would I expect that to work for anybody else? It really doesn't, does it? Okay, anybody want to guess specifically what this is? Fantastic. Just imagine the amount of engineering that goes into that. This is more than a lifetime's work for 100 people to put this together from scratch. It is a Rolls-Royce Merlin, that is correct. It is one of the heroes of the Second World War for the Allies. If you've ever heard of one of these, it is, as an engineer, I have to say, it is quite an emotional thing to hear one of these running. They sound fantastic. It's a V12 27-litre engine that powered most of, or many of the Allied planes in World War II. Fantastic piece of engineering. All right, so given that we accept we can't do anything alone, and given that we know we need to level up on people skills, the obvious answer is we need to get better at communication. And as one of my more favorite bands, 10cc, said, communication is the problem to the answer, particularly in our world. So, human beings have evolved to be societal and deal with each other, interact. And part of that is the way we communicate. And there's a ton of stuff in communication. Psychologists say that, estimate that probably 15% of communication is verbal, and everything else, the 85%, the rest of it is nonverbal. And what does that mean? Well, we've got things like context. What's the context of what's being said? The historical interaction with that person. Have they been mean to you before? That's going to affect your outcome. That's going to affect your approach to dealing with them. Personality types. Type A's and type B's and all that sort of thing. Some people work differently. These clashes, these interactions produce friction. Body language is a great one. I'm doing lots of this at the moment. I'm aware of doing lots of this at the moment. There's this area, this is tremendously interesting to me. There's this area between your shoulders and your waist, which if you move your hands around in, is considered the honesty zone. It's like I'm saying things right now that I believe to be true. I'm doing lots of expansive moving around and stuff like that. Somebody lying is probably going to be here like this, and they're going to be looking up and to their left, I think it is. There's all these tells. That's really interesting. I'm absolutely fascinated by this. There's lots of studies that show that polygraphs are less effective than a human being who has been trained to spot lies. The CIA, the NSA, all these three-letter agencies, they now train and employ people that are human lie detectors, and they're more effective than polygraphs. They still can't be used in court, but they can spot when you're lying from body language and tells and stuff like that. A poker player is a master at this, okay? Somebody who wins at poker, they know how to read people. They're excellent social engineers. So, 85%, there's all these things. Speed of response is another one. Tone of voice, your own state of mind, and your own prejudices. All of these form that 85% that you're not getting from the verbal communication. There's lots and lots of interesting stuff about this. How am I doing? I better pick things up. Ask yourself this, when you write an email, what's your signal to noise ratio now? It's an easy one. Oh, I should give you the the quiz as well while we're at it. 15%, approximately. Pretty much all you've got is verbal in email. You've got no timing, you've got no tone of voice. You might have context if you've dealt with this person before. You have almost nothing. Email is probably the worst communication medium that the human race has ever come up with. It is awful. There is no context there. So, anybody, I should have put these up earlier. Obviously, the telegraph key, the simplest form of communication you can think of. I'm going to give you that one. Anybody know what the one on the right is? It's a good one. This is a tough one. It's not a telephone. It is. It's actually the spark gap transmitter, the first Marconi transmitter that was created for the radio. It uses sparks jumping between the electrodes there to interfere with a radio receiver. Probably didn't sound great. It's not going to be hi-fi, but it did send a signal. So, interesting stuff. And just imagine, even the telegraph key, could you make that on your own? It's pretty simple. And then you'd need all the infrastructure of the wires and everything like that. We can't do it alone. You have to deal with people. Blogs, forums, same problem. They are verbal. They have almost no context. If you're lucky, you get context from the fact that people have read what you know before they're putting this together. So, I looked for a signal that was approximately 15% signal and approximately 85% noise. I have no idea whether this is actually one of those, but you can't tell much from it, can you? If you're dealing with just that, you are operating at a fairly inefficient networking bandwidth or network reliability. Ask yourself this: if you were using an internet connection that gave you 85% packet loss, would you trust that connection? I wouldn't. So, what happens? What happens with, and I'm interested in this one, by all means, tweet what you see there. I'll get to what that is in a minute, but try and keep it PG, please. The bottom right one is what I'm talking about. I'm really interested to see. We're going to go back and see what people tweet for that one in a minute. So what do people do when there's signal loss? Well, who sees a white triangle on the upper left there? Is it there? Anybody think that the white triangle is there? No, but you see it, right? This is what human beings do. They fill in information. We're programmed to do this. It's a survival trait. It comes from the fact that we're still here and we're not some historical footnote in evolution. We need to make these connections, and that's what we do. When we see a signal come in with 15% or with only 15% signal and 85% noise, we fill in the blanks ourselves. What does that mean? It means we look at what a person has done in the past. We need to pay attention to that. Have we been crappy to other people in the past? That's going to affect our interaction with them right now. Okay? Again, enlightened self-interest. I'm not trying to convince you to be good for good's sake. I'm trying to convince you to do it because it's in your benefit to do it. What has that person done in the past? What's our opinion of that person? Another big one, and this is really hard, this is one that I struggle with a lot, is a lot of what we fill in on that, if we have no other information, is what we would do. If we assume the worst about somebody, it actually says something kind of bad about us. Okay? It's like, what would we do? Would we get angry and shout at them? That's what they're doing. I know this because that's what I'd do in that situation. Just be aware of that. It tells you a lot about yourself. And this is why I put this in there. This is a Rorschach test. These are ink blots that are randomly created by shoving some ink on a paper and then folding them up. Psychologists or psychiatrists use them to try and figure out what people see, because there's no information there, okay? It's all constructed in your head. Now, I think that there's a certain amount of hubris in a human being attempting to then interpret what people see. That's why I'm really curious. I'm not going to do that, because my interpretation is also flawed. It's based on my experiences as well. For the record, I looked at this and I see, probably because I like football, I'm an American football fan, I see two cheerleaders leaping up in the air with pom-poms celebrating a touchdown. That's what I see. Do you see that? You can kind of see that in there? That's what I see, for the record. I don't know what that says about me. Probably that somebody took my teddy bear away when I was a kid or something, but just so you know, let's see what other people came up with from this, because I'm very curious. Did anybody say A functor from ink to psychoanalysis. Majora's Mask. I will admit that there's a masky aspect about it. I went for the cheerleaders in the end, but I saw a face in there too. We're very programmed to see faces. That's a big part of being human. Some creepy alien, a hungry frog. Oh, 2 ballet dancers jumping, so very similar to mine. Using email, okay, got it, good enough, right. Back to the main thing here. Right, so we interpolate, okay? We probably shouldn't do that as much as we do. Be aware that you're doing it in your interactions. All right, how can we get around this problem? Well, in CDs, actually in all sorts of digital communication, I think it's kind of old hat now. It's what I learned about in school. There's probably much, much more in the field of research. But there was this thing called Reed-Solomon encoding, which is basically putting extra information in so that when you get the signal loss that is definitely coming, people can reconstruct it better, or machines can reconstruct it better. It's what they use on CDs to get around scratches and things like that. Put more information into your posts. Give more context. There's a nice rule that they teach you when you learn to be an advocate. It's a bit of maths. Anyone heard this? 3 times 3 equals 1. 9 times 1 equals 0. Basically what they're saying is if you tell people 3 things and you repeat it 3 times, they might take one of them away with them. If you tell people 9 things one time, they won't get a damn thing out of what you've said. Okay? So build in a lot of redundancy to what you're saying. Allow less interpretation by sticking to facts. Facts are good. Saying, ugh, I hate that, that's not a fact. Saying vars are less desirable because they introduce mutable state into code is a fact. Okay? One is, vars are, ugh. No. Vars have some fact about them. That's useful information. It's a high signal. Use extra redundancy. I'm a big fan of using emoticons. We're giving something back. We're getting some of that context back that we didn't have before. Any trick that you can do like that is good. How am I doing for time? I have absolutely no idea. Oh, very close. All right, pick it up. We're nearly done. By the way, I assume you all know this is an oscilloscope. This is used for, going back to the computer building analogy, you pretty much can't get a computer power supply without somebody somewhere having an oscilloscope hooked up to some circuit somewhere along the way. Constructing an oscilloscope would take several or hundreds of people many lifetimes if they did it from scratch. I mean, you've got vacuum tubes in there, you've got high tension generators. God, you've got loads of stuff in there. It's a fantastic piece of equipment. I used to have one. I got really excited about this because it looked like the one my dad brought home for me when I was young, and it went wrong and I couldn't fix it. I couldn't even fix something that was there because it was too complicated. So I could own one now, but I really don't need to because somebody else is doing that for me. Okay, read your message after you've written it is always good advice. Go back and read it in a different light. Read it as negatively as you possibly can before you hit send. And sometimes it's better to have no signal at all than a bad signal. Can you just spot the signs of an interchange or a discourse going bad and walk away from it? That's probably the best thing you can do. All right. An event. I'm looking for an event to be tweeted for this one. It's a pretty good event, specific one, again, that was the culmination of a ton of engineering. So, do we just give up on this then? It's all too hard, isn't it? Well, no, because you get moments like this that make it all worthwhile. This is why we work together. We can't do stuff like this without figuring out a way to work together. So, you just need to do that, and there is loads to do. In the Scala community in particular, I'm actually going to bring this back around to Scala finally. We have a lot to do. Right now, I think the last time Adrian looked, it's probably changed a little bit, but certainly the numbers I have are that about 50% of the Scala compiler work that happens is TypeSafe funded. About another 25% comes from EPFL, and about another 25% comes from the community. And there's all sorts of reasons. People can say, well, that's because this and that's because that. One of the other things about engineering is, and science in general, is you cannot change the past until somebody invents a way of bending the information cone or whatever it is back upon itself so we can go back in time. There's really no point in worrying about the past. What we have to do now is figure out what we're going to do going forward. There is loads to do, and we want to get the community involvement up in Scala, in the libraries, in the compiler. There's lots of stuff going on right now. I'll talk about that a little bit at the end. And the event, specifically, moon landing, yeah. Apollo 11, the moment that they landed the Eagle on the moon, I think it was. I'm not sure if this is when they landed or when Neil Armstrong steps out, but it's then. Imagine the amount of man-hours from basics that went into that moment. It's incredible. All right, so at this point, I hope I've convinced you that this is really important and that you're raring to go and you want to learn, you want to improve your engineering by doing more with people. Well, I have the perfect opportunity for you. Because I'm not getting paid for this anymore and it's all voluntary, I'm really far behind on all the stuff we've put together so far. We've made some good moves. We have Scala SIPs revived. That's the Scala improvement process. We have a new thing called SLIPs, which is for the core libraries, which have been ignored for a few years. Our core libraries effectively haven't changed massively since 2.8 in Scala. And there's a lot of stuff that we know we could do better and do differently there. So there's a lot of work to be done here. The great part of it is, if you do this, you'll get better at dealing with people, I promise. And as a result, you'll also get better at Scala. It's going to be hard for you not to pick up more Scala out of doing this. It requires no Scala skill, particularly. It's a lot of procedural work, which is why I don't get it all done in time. It's things like emailing people, finding out what the status of stuff is, finding out if they've got any problems and if they need anything from the Scala team or any of the rest of us. If you want to help, there's a thing that pilots do. How am I doing? Oh, it's like 3 minutes. All right, I'm wrapping up. So there's a thing that pilots do to bring order from chaos. When you fly small planes, which I learned to do but never actually got my pilot's license a few years ago, if you come in and land at an unmanned airport, you need to let people know what you're doing to avoid the potential of a crash. There could be somebody else coming in, but there's nobody managing that airport. So they have this thing called Unicom. It's a frequency that you broadcast on when you're doing stuff around the airport. And Unicom, whether there's somebody there or not, you jump on the Unicom and you say, Tango Foxtrot Echo 43, coming in for landing at, whatever, Wallaby Springs Airport. Approach, whatever, 2 minutes to landing, and you basically announce your intent to land. If there's no one else about, you might feel a bit silly about talking to no one, but if there is anybody else about, they know not to land at the same time as you. What I hope we can do, and we've got a site for this, is we have a Scala SLIP, which is also acting as our SIP headquarters right now. I'm going to start putting jobs to do in issues on here. We have a Gitter channel. If you want to help, please join us on the Gitter channel, announce your intent, and coordinate with people on there. I'm not going to be there all the time, so don't check with me. Use it like a Unicom. Say what you're doing. Pick one of these issues up. Go do it. Follow up and find out what people are doing on, say, SIP 18 or, no, SIP 23 or whatever. And just generally help out. It'll give you a good chance. If you get into a situation where you're getting angry or loggerheads with someone, take a step back and ask somebody else to take over. That's the best thing you can do. And there's plenty of work out there. So that's my pitch. Thank you very much. I hope that wasn't too boring. And, oh no, there's one final quiz. I'll leave this one open for a bit. Oh, right, okay. All right, just tell me what these three things have in common, if you can. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, thanks.